The Galactic Concord gathered on Viridia Prime, a massive space station orbiting a quiet blue star far from Earth. Delegates from over 200 worlds filled the grand chamber, their voices a low hum of many languages and thoughts. Some wore robes of silk and light, others armor of polished metal, and a few floated in personal bubbles of atmosphere. All had come to discuss one thing: what Earth had done. Just 3 weeks earlier, the Krell Dominion had attacked Tranquility Base on the moon. No warning. No reason given at first. Their warships dropped from the dark like silent hawks and fired plasma lances into the colony's domes. Over 3,000 people died: scientists, engineers, teachers, children. The base's main communications tower, Earth's link to deep space, melted into slag. The attack shocked the solar system. Earth sent emergency signals to the Concord demanding justice, but the Council moved slowly as it always did. Now in the chamber, the Krell ambassador stood tall on his platform. His skin was gray and scaled, his eyes black and unblinking. He spoke in a voice like grinding stone. The humans were building weapons, he claimed. We acted to protect galactic peace. Our strike was surgical, necessary. A murmur rose among the delegates. Many had heard this before. The Krell always called their violence necessary, but few dared challenge them openly. The Dominion controlled a dozen star systems and had war fleets older than most human cities. The Concord valued order above all, and order meant avoiding war, even when wrong had been done. Back on Earth, people watched the broadcast in silence. In New York, Chicago, Nairobi, Jakarta, and Sydney, crowds gathered in public squares, faces lit by the glow of screens. They saw their dead ignored, their pain dismissed as politics. President Daniel Hayes sat alone in the White House Situation Room, his hands folded on the table. He was a quiet man, not given to speeches, but his eyes held a fire that hadn't been there before. We asked nicely, he said to General Elena Ruiz, who stood beside him. We showed proof. We waited, Ruiz nodded. She was in her 50s with short black hair and a scar across her left eyebrow from a training accident decades ago. They think we're weak, she said. They think we'll beg and wait and fade away. Hayes didn't answer right away. Outside the window, rain fell softly on the Washington night. We're not fading, he finally said. Deep in the asteroid belt, beyond the reach of most alien sensors, hidden inside hollowed-out rocks and cloaked by experimental fields, something stirred. Project Iron Resolve had been in motion for years, known only to a handful of people. While the world believed Earth relied on borrowed alien tech, old drives bought from traders, basic shields reverse-engineered from crashed scout ships, the truth was different. Human scientists had been working in secret, pushing past limits others thought impossible. Quantum singularity warheads. Adaptive stealth that bent light and gravity. Neural-linked drones that moved like schools of fish, thinking as one. None of it had been tested in war, but it was ready. On Viridia Prime, the debate dragged on. The Zenthari delegate, a tall being with iridescent skin, argued that the Krell must be held accountable. But the council speaker, Miratolan of Nereos, urged patience. Rushing to judgment risks greater conflict, she said, her voice calm but firm. We must follow protocol. The word echoed through Earth's command centers like a curse. Protocol meant waiting while graves filled. Protocol meant letting bullies decide what was fair. In Houston, Fleet Admiral Paul Dawson reviewed final schematics on a glowing screen. His office was small, cluttered with models of old ships and photos of his grandchildren. He tapped a button and a message flashed to every hidden shipyard. Stand by. Phase 3 authorized. No one on Earth celebrated. There were no parades, no cheers. People went to work, to school, to hospitals, but a quiet change moved through them. They spoke less, listened more, watched the skies. The Krell, confident in their victory, began broadcasting victory hymns across their networks. They showed footage of the ruined moon base, calling it a lesson for upstart species. They didn't know Earth had already copied every frame, every boast, every cruel word. President Hayes gave a short address that evening. He stood in the rose garden under soft lights, rain still damp on his shoulders. He didn't wear a uniform, just a dark suit like any man speaking to neighbors. 3,000 of ours are gone, he said. Not soldiers, not fighters. People who believed space belonged to everyone. The Concord says we must be patient, but patience does not bring back the dead. Justice does, he paused. The cameras zoomed in on his face, tired but steady. We do not want war. But we will not live in fear, and we will not be erased. The speech lasted less than 3 minutes, but across the solar system it was replayed a million times. On Mars, miners stopped their drills to listen. On Titan, researchers in methane domes stood in silence. Even the few alien traders docked at Luna Station watched uneasy. The Krell laughed. Their high command called Hayes's words the squeak of a cornered rodent. They doubled patrols near human space, sure Earth would try something foolish, like sending old frigates with broken shields. They never imagined what waited in the dark. In the hidden yards, engines hummed to life. Hulls sealed, crews strapped in. Names like Aegis, Liberty, and Vigilance glowed softly on bridge consoles. These ships had no flashy designs, no alien curves. They were blocky, strong, built for one purpose. Earth had spent centuries learning from others. Now it was time to teach. The Concord continued its meetings. Arguments stretched into days. Some delegates whispered that Earth might act alone. Others scoffed. They barely have warp drive, one said. What can they do? But far from Viridia Prime, beyond the eyes of diplomats and spies, humanity's answer was already moving. Silent, fast, ready. No one on Earth sent a declaration. No fleet broadcast a challenge. The retaliation would not come with fanfare. It would come like night. Sudden, complete, and absolute. And when it did, the galaxy would learn that the quiet species from the third planet had been watching, learning, and waiting. Not for conquest. Not for glory. But for the moment when silence would speak louder than any war cry. For now, though, there was only stillness. The calm before the storm. The last breath before the thunder. And in that quiet, Earth made its choice. While the Galactic Concord argued in circles on Viridia Prime, Earth moved in silence. No new speeches. No angry broadcasts. The world seemed calm on the surface, but beneath it, everything had changed. People walked a little straighter. Workers in factories stayed late without being asked. Farmers checked their fields with sharper eyes. It was as if the whole planet had taken a deep breath and held it. General Elena Ruiz stood on the command deck of the orbital hub, Orion Station, her arms crossed, watching a live feed from the asteroid belt. On the screen, 3 massive shapes drifted in the dark, wrapped in energy-dampening shrouds that made them nearly invisible. These were not the old defense ships the galaxy knew. These were something new, something human-made from the ground up. No alien parts, no borrowed tech. Just steel, fire, and will. Fleet Admiral Paul Dawson joined her holding a steaming cup of black coffee. He didn't speak at first. He just watched the ships, Aegis, Liberty, and Vigilance, as they powered up their core systems one by one. Each hum sent a ripple through the station's deck plates. They're ready, he said finally. Ruiz nodded. They've been ready for months. We just needed the order. And now we have it. Back on Earth, evacuation drills began. Not with sirens, but with quiet alerts sent to personal devices. On Mars, families packed emergency kits and moved to reinforced underground shelters. On Titan, scientists sealed their labs and backed up data to shielded servers. No panic, no chaos. Just careful practice steps. Everyone knew why. No one needed to say it out loud. The Krell, meanwhile, grew bolder. Their patrols pushed closer to the edge of human-controlled space. They scanned for signs of rebellion, for fleets gathering, for weapons being built. But they found nothing unusual. Earth's known ship sat in dry dock. Its defense grids ran on low power. Its communications were quiet. To the Krell, it looked like fear. They did not understand that silence could be a weapon too. In a secure bunker beneath the Rocky Mountains, President Daniel Hayes met with his closest advisors. Maps of the Krell homeworld system glowed on the walls. Planets, moons, fleet positions, power hubs. Every detail had been gathered over years by deep cover probes disguised as space dust. We hit fast, Ruiz said, pointing to a cluster of orbital stations near the Krell capital world. Take out their command nexus first. Without it, their fleets can't coordinate. And the cities? Asked Secretary of Defense Carl Owens, a man with a slow voice and steady hands. No cities, Hayes said firmly. No civilians. Only military and command targets. We show them we're not like them, Dawson added. We also deploy the Echo drones. They'll flood every public screen in the Krell Empire with footage of Tranquility Base. Over and over. Let them see what they did. The room fell quiet. They all knew the risk. If this failed, Earth would be crushed. But if they did nothing, they would be crushed anyway, slowly, quietly. erased from history like so many other small species before them. Out in the void, the three human battleships detached from their hidden docks. Their engines flared once softly, then vanished into folded space. No one saw them go. Not the Krell scouts, not the conquered observers, not even the traders watching from neutral zones. Earth's fleet had slipped the leash. On Viridia Prime, the debate still dragged on. Ambassador Vexillor of the Xanthari stood again, his voice sharp. The Krell must answer for their crime. If the conquered will not act, then others will lose faith in this body. Speaker Miratolan sighed. Faith is not the issue. Stability is. One act of revenge could ignite a war across 50 systems. But what is justice without action? Vexillor shot back. No one had an answer. The chamber buzzed with uneasy energy. Some delegates checked their private comms, sensing a shift in the air they couldn't explain. Back on Earth, schoolchildren returned to classrooms. Farmers planted new crops. Engineers repaired solar arrays. Life went on, but everyone felt it, the waiting. Like standing on a cliff edge, knowing the ground would soon give way. In Houston, Mission Control ran final simulations. Young officers with tired eyes double-checked targeting coordinates. A technician named Luis Mendez adjusted a neural link calibration for the drone swarm, his fingers moving fast. He thought of his sister who had worked at Tranquility Base. She was gone now, but her name was written on the side of Drone 7. No one talked about glory. No one dreamed of medals. They worked because it was right. Because someone had to stand up. The Krell High Command held a victory feast on their capital moon. Generals toasted with dark wine, laughing about the little blue world and its pathetic cries for help. They posted more footage of the ruined moon base, slowed down, set to music. They thought it would frighten other species into obedience. They did not know that every frame was being studied by human analysts, used to map their networks, their pride, their blind spots. Deep in folded space, the human fleet traveled faster than light, wrapped in silence. Their stealth fields bent sensor waves around them like water around a stone. Their crews spoke in whispers. Their weapons stayed cold, but ready. Admiral Dawson stood on the bridge of the Aegis, hands behind his back. He looked at the star map on the main screen. One jump left. Then they would be inside the Krell home system. Remember, he said to his crew, we are not here to destroy. We are here to make them remember us. General Ruiz aboard the Liberty reviewed the strike plan one last time. She thought of the 3,000 names on the memorial wall back on Earth. She would not add more. President Hayes stood alone on the White House balcony again. The night was clear. He looked up at the moon, a pale sliver in the sky. Somewhere up there, ghosts waited. And soon justice would fly. No one on Earth celebrated. No one cheered. But in every home, every lab, every shipyard, people held their breath. They knew the storm was coming. And when it hit, the galaxy would finally understand. Humanity did not beg for respect. It earned it, in fire, in silence, and in truth. The fleet dropped out of folded space at the edge of the Krell system. Stars burned cold around them. Ahead, the enemy's worlds glowed like embers in the dark. Earth's retaliation had begun. The human fleet dropped out of folded space just beyond the outer rings of the Krell home system. No alarm sounded. No patrol ships scrambled. The Krell had grown lazy. Sure, no one would dare touch their sacred core worlds. Their sensors saw only empty space, cosmic dust, and the slow drift of asteroids. They did not see the three dark shapes hanging in the void like wolves in tall grass. Aboard the Aegis, Admiral Paul Dawson gave a single order. Execute Iron Resolve. In less than a second, the fleet moved. The Liberty and Vigilance split off, vanishing into low-orbit trajectories using adaptive stealth fields that bent light and masked heat. The Aegis stayed central, its quantum core humming as it charged the first Singularity warhead. Not a bomb meant to explode, but to collapse, a tiny, controlled black hole that would swallow energy, metal, and signal alike before winking out. The target was the Krell Command Nexus, a massive orbital station shaped like a spiked crown. It controlled all military traffic across the Dominion. Without it, the Krell fleets would be blind, deaf, and alone. The strike hit at 03:14 local time on the Krell capital moon. The warhead opened a micro-singularity right at the heart of the Nexus. Metal twisted inward. Power conduits vanished. Communications died in an instant. The station did not explode, it imploded, folding into itself like paper in a fist. One moment it was there. The next, only debris and silence remained. At the same time, the Liberty unleashed its drone swarm. Thousands of small insect-like machines poured into the upper atmosphere, riding magnetic currents down to the surface. They found every public screen, every data terminal, every broadcast hub. Within minutes, the same footage played everywhere. The Krell warships firing on Tranquility Base, civilians running, domes cracking, children's faces frozen in the last seconds before the plasma hit. The video looped endlessly with no sound, no commentary, just truth raw and unfiltered. On the ground, Krell citizens stopped in the streets. Workers dropped their tools. Soldiers stared at screens in barracks. For the first time, many saw what their leaders had done. Not a surgical strike, not necessary defense, just murder. The Vigilance targeted the orbital defense grid, a ring of weapon platforms that protected the system. Instead of destroying them, it fired electromagnetic pulses tuned to fry unshielded circuits. The platforms didn't explode. They just went dark one by one like lights switched off. The Krell Navy, still waking up in their bunks, found their ships locked down, weapons offline, comms dead. 17 minutes. That was all it took. No human ship fired on a city. No bomb fell on a home. No civilian was harmed. But the Krell Empire was brought to its knees not by fire but by precision, by shame, by the sudden shocking realization that they were not untouchable. As the human fleet regrouped at the system's edge, Admiral Dawson sent one final transmission. It was not encrypted, not hidden. It blasted across every open channel in the Krell network, in their language clear and cold. We do not seek conquest. We demand respect. Then the fleet vanished again, slipping back into folded space before the first Krell reserve ship could even power up its engines. On Earth, people did not cheer. They stood in silence. In schools, teachers paused lessons. In hospitals, nurses looked out windows. In homes, families held each other. They knew what had been done. They knew the cost of what came next. But they also knew they had finally been seen. News spread fast. Traders near the Krell border reported the blackout. Scanners picked up the energy signature of the Singularity Pulse. Within hours, the whole galaxy knew Earth had struck back, and it had done so with terrifying skill. On Viridia Prime, the Concord chamber fell utterly still. Delegates stared at their screens, replaying the few fragments of data that had leaked out. The Krell Command Nexus gone, defense grid disabled, civilian infrastructure untouched, and that message, that simple, brutal message. Ambassador Vexler stood slowly. They did it, he whispered. They actually did it. Speaker Mira Tolan's face was unreadable, but her hands trembled slightly. She had spent her life believing that only old empires held real power. Now, a young species from a single star system had rewritten the rules in under 20 minutes. Back in the Krell capital, chaos reigned. Generals shouted over dead comms. Citizens gathered in squares, watching the looped footage, asking questions no leader could answer. Riots began, not against Earth, but against their own government. How could they have been so blind? So arrogant? The Krell High Council went into emergency lockdown, but their authority was already crumbling. Their myth of invincibility had been shattered by 3 ships and a truth too heavy to ignore. On Mars, a young engineer named Jake Morris watched the news with his daughter on his lap. She pointed at the screen and said, "Did we win, Daddy?" He kissed her forehead. "We reminded them we exist." In Houston, General Ruiz allowed herself one small smile as she reviewed the mission logs. Every target hit. 0 human casualties. The plan had worked perfectly. But she knew this was not the end. It was only the beginning of a new chapter, one where Earth would no longer be spoken of in whispers but in caution. President Hayes received the final report in the Oval Office. He read it once, then set it down. He walked to the window and looked out at the Washington dawn. The sky was pink and gold. Birds sang in the trees. Somewhere a child laughed. He thought of the 3,000. He hoped they could rest now. The galaxy had expected Earth to beg, to cower, to fade. Instead, humanity had shown up with quiet fury, perfect aim, and a message carved in silence. And as the stars turned above, one truth burned brighter than all the rest. Earth was not a victim. It was a force, and the universe would never forget it. The Galactic Concord called an emergency session within hours of Earth's strike. Viridia Prime's grand chamber, usually filled with calm debate and measured tones, now buzzed with shock and confusion. Delegates rushed in from every corner of known space, their faces tight with disbelief. No one had expected this. No one had believed Earth capable of such a move, let alone one so clean, so precise, so utterly humiliating to the Krell. Ambassador Vexlor of the Zinthari stood at his podium, his voice sharp with urgency. Earth acted alone, yes, but they struck only military targets. They harmed no civilians. They exposed Krell war crimes the conquered ignored for years. Is this not justice? A murmur rose. Some nodded. Others shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The Krell delegation was absent. They had withdrawn in shame, their communications still down, their leadership in disarray, but not all agreed. Representative Corin of the Veln Collective slammed a three-fingered hand on his console. This sets a dangerous precedent. If every species takes justice into its own hands, the galaxy descends into chaos. Earth must be punished. Speaker Miratolan raised a webbed hand for silence. Her voice, usually calm as deep ocean currents, carried a new weight. Punish them for what? For defending their dead? For showing restraint the Krell never showed? The room fell quiet. No one had an easy answer. Footage of the strike played again on the central holo display. Silent, clinical, devastating. The human fleet appeared, struck, and vanished. No taunts, no threats. Just action. Meanwhile, Earth sent no further messages. No boasts, no demands. Instead, a single envoy ship departed Luna Station, flying the Concorde's neutral colors. Aboard was Kyle Bennett, a quiet diplomat with kind eyes and a sharp mind. He carried no weapons, only data crystals. Thousands of hours of evidence gathered over decades. Proof of Krell raids on unarmed colonies. Records of stolen resources. Logs of destroyed outposts. All ignored by the Concorde because the Krell were too powerful to challenge. When Bennett arrived at Viridia Prime, he was met with suspicion. Guards scanned his ship twice. Delegates whispered as he walked through the halls. But he did not argue. He simply requested a hearing. He got one the next day. Bennett stood alone in the center of the chamber, small against the towering figures of alien dignitaries. He did not raise his voice. He did not accuse. He just played the files. First, a recording from a mining colony in the Helios Belt, Krell ships demanding surrender, then burning the settlement when the humans refused. Next, a distress call from a medical outpost near Proxima, cut off mid-sentence by plasma fire. Then, intercepted Krell command logs discussing population reduction on frontier worlds to clear space for Dominion expansion. One by one, the truths piled up. Many delegates had never seen this evidence. The Concorde's own archives had buried it, labeled unverified or low priority. But here it was, raw and undeniable. A delegate from the insectoid Mirakesh hive leaned forward, her antennae twitching. "Why did you not bring this sooner?" she asked. Bennett looked at her, then at the whole chamber. "We did, for years. No one listened. You called us emotional, overreacting, unstable, so we stopped asking. We acted." Silence filled the room like water. Even Corin of the Veln said nothing. The moral ground had shifted and everyone felt it. Back on Earth, life continued. Children returned to lunar classrooms under new, stronger domes. Engineers tested rebuilt comms arrays. Farmers harvested crops under open skies. There was no celebration, only relief. A quiet sense that the world had finally stood tall and not broken. In Houston, Admiral Dawson reviewed sensor logs from the fleet's return. All ships intact, all crew safe. He allowed himself a rare sigh of relief. General Ruiz stood beside him, arms crossed, watching the stars on the main screen. "They'll talk for weeks," she said. "Let them," Dawson replied. "We gave them something to talk about." On Viridia Prime, the debate raged into the night. Some still called for sanctions against Earth. But more and more voices rose in defense. A delegate from the ocean world of Thalos said, "If my people had suffered what Earth did, and had the strength to respond like this, I would be proud." Even former Krell allies began to distance themselves. The Dominion's image was shattered. Their power had not been broken by force alone, but by the mirror Earth held up to their cruelty. Speaker Tolan called for a vote, not on punishment, but on recognition. Should Earth's actions be condemned as aggression or acknowledged as lawful self-defense under galactic emergency protocols? The tally took hours. When it came, the result stunned even the optimists. 112 in favor of Earth, 89 against. The rest abstained. It was not unanimous, but it was enough. The conquered would not punish Earth. Instead, it would open a formal inquiry into Krell war crimes, using the very evidence Bennett had brought. As the decision was announced, a strange thing happened. Delegates from smaller, weaker species, those who had long lived in fear of empires like the Krell, stood and bowed slightly toward Earth's empty envoy seat. It was not a grand gesture, just a nod, a thank you, a sign that they finally had hope. Bennett watched from the observation gallery, his throat tight. He thought of Tranquility Base, of the names he had read every night before sleep, of the quiet resolve in President Hayes's voice when he said, "We will not be erased." Now the galaxy knew it too. That evening, as Viridia Prime drifted in its orbit, the stars outside seemed different, brighter, closer. The old order had cracked, and through the break something new was growing, something built not on fear, but on fairness. Earth had not asked for war. It had not sought glory. It had simply demanded to be seen as equal. And in doing so, it had given courage to others who had stayed silent too long. No one spoke of Earth as the little blue world anymore. From that day on, when species spoke of humanity, they did so with a new word in their voices: respect. And in the quiet halls of power across the galaxy, leaders began to wonder, what else had they underestimated about the humans? The Krell Dominion did not collapse overnight, but its power did. Within weeks of Earth's strike, its outer colonies began to break away. Governors who once bowed to the high command now questioned orders. Soldiers refused to patrol worlds where the truth of Tranquility Base had spread. The footage Earth had broadcast, the silent loop of civilians dying, had done more damage than any bomb. It had turned the Krell's own people against them. Faced with unrest and the loss of their central command, the Krell leadership did the unthinkable. They asked for peace. Not through threats, not through spies, but with a formal message sent to Earth's government, carried by a neutral envoy. They offered reparations. They agreed to withdraw from disputed systems. They even promised to stand trial before the conquered for war crimes. It was not full justice, but it was a start. Earth did not gloat. President Daniel Hayes accepted the offer with quiet words. "We do not want your surrender," he said in his reply. "We want your promise to never do this again." The Galactic Concord, shaken but adapting, moved faster than ever before. Speaker Mira Tolan pushed through a new clause in the Charter, Article 17, allowing member worlds to respond to unprovoked attacks without waiting for Council approval, as long as the response was proportional and targeted only military assets. Everyone knew it was written because of Earth. The humans had not just defended themselves, they had changed the rules for everyone. On Mars, children returned to open-air schools under reinforced domes. On Titan, scientists resumed their work mapping methane rivers, now with better shields and faster alerts. The fear that had hung over human space like a shadow began to lift, not because the galaxy was suddenly kind, but because it now knew humanity would not be pushed around. Back on Earth, life settled into a new rhythm. Not the old peace, but a stronger one, built on respect, not hope. Factories that once made consumer goods now also built parts for deep space sensors. Universities added courses in xenolaw and interstellar ethics. People spoke less about aliens as monsters, and more about them as neighbors, some friendly, some not, but all to be met with eyes open. President Hayes visited the Tranquility Memorial Garden in Geneva on a cool spring morning. The garden was simple, 3,000 white stones, each carved with a name set among cherry trees just beginning to bloom. He walked slowly, hands in his coat pockets, stopping at random stones. He did not speak. He just stood remembering. A young girl, no older than 8, approached him shyly. She held a single white flower. "My mom worked here," she said, pointing to a stone near the path. Hayes knelt, his knees cracking softly. "What was her name?" "Lena Torres," the girl whispered. He touched the stone gently. She was brave, and she mattered. The girl placed the flower on the stone and looked up at him. "Are we safe now?" He thought for a moment. "We're safer because we stood up. But safety isn't given. It's kept every day." She nodded as if she understood more than her years should allow. and walked back to her father waiting by the gate. In Houston, Admiral Paul Dawson retired. He handed command of the fleet to a younger officer and moved to a small house near the Gulf Coast. He spent his days fishing and teaching navigation to local kids. No one knew who he was unless they looked closely at the quiet man with the old Navy cap. General Elena Ruiz stayed on, helping design Earth's new defense doctrine, focused not on conquest, but on deterrence, speed, and moral clarity. She often said, "Strength means nothing if you don't know when not to use it." The 3 battleships, Aegis, Liberty, and Vigilance, were not hidden anymore. They patrolled the edges of human space openly, their hulls marked with Earth's new insignia, a blue circle with a single white star. Alien traders gave them wide berth, not out of fear but respect. On Viridia Prime, Earth now had a permanent seat on the Concord Council. Kyle Bennett, once a junior diplomat, became Earth's chief representative. He spoke rarely, but when he did, others listened. He never raised his voice. He just spoke truth clearly and calmly, and that was enough. The galaxy changed slowly. Old empires grew cautious. Young species grew bold. Trade routes once blocked by bullies opened to all, and whenever a small world was threatened, they no longer looked only to the Concord for help. Sometimes they sent a message to Earth, not because Earth promised to fight for them, but because Earth had shown that standing up for what's right, even when you're small, can shake the stars. Years passed. New ships launched from Earth's yards, not just warships, but science vessels, rescue cruisers, and peace monitors. Humanity was no longer just a planet. It was a presence, a voice that could not be ignored, and yet in homes across Earth, life remained simple. Parents tucked children into bed. Friends shared meals. Farmers watched sunsets. The difference was this: they did it without looking over their shoulders. They knew their world had earned its place not by shouting but by acting, not by begging but by standing firm. One evening, President Hayes stood again on the White House balcony. The moon hung full and bright in the sky. Tranquility Base was being rebuilt, this time with stronger walls and deeper roots. He thought of the silence that had followed Earth's strike, the stunned, speechless silence of a galaxy that had finally understood. He smiled faintly. They had not wanted to be feared, only seen, and now they were. Somewhere far out in the black, a human patrol ship passed a Krell freighter. Neither fired. Neither fled. They simply acknowledged each other with a flash of light, a signal older than words. Peace was not perfect, but it was real, and for the first time in a long time, Earth slept without fear.